everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Ken Goldman. I'm with Communications and Stakeholder Outreach with the Integrated Award Environment at GSA. I want to thank everybody for joining this webinar today. We still have a bunch of people joining, so we may repeat ourselves, especially at the beginning a couple of times to get everybody up to speed on what we're doing. Today's presentation is going to be about the migration of SAM.gov into beta.SAM.gov, which is happening on May 24th. At which point the beta will go away and there will be just one system called SAM.gov. So my colleague Kat is going to walk us all through that and what that's going to look like for federal users of the system and what you need to know. Her presentation is going to be somewhere around 40-45 minutes. Then we're going to try and leave at least 15, maybe 20 minutes for Q&A at the end. So I do want you all to help me out a little bit. In Zoom, there are two separate chat logs. A lot of people are chatting in the main chat log right now. But if you have a question about the presentation or about the system integration, please put those questions in the Zoom Q&A chat log. That way we'll be able to respond in one place and won't, be bouncing back and forth. So want to let you know that today's presentation, the deck itself, a recording of the event, and then some written answers to the Q&As will be posted on our Interact space. And I will post in a link to that into the main chat for you in just a moment. So if you're not already following us on Interact, please do. You'll be able to get the deck recording and the Q&As in Interact. So we'll make that available to everybody. And I want to make sure that you all know that today's event is also being recorded right now. So I may interrupt a few times just to remind everybody, but for the moment, I'm going to turn it over to Catherine Rollins. She's our lead program manager, and she's going to walk you through what you need to know about the upcoming merger. So with that, over to Kat.
Thank you so very much, Ken, and good afternoon, everyone. I was watching the chat and multiple folks saying welcome from different areas across the country, and I think I saw at least one international. So welcome and thank you for joining us today. The focus topic for today is around what's changing for federal users, so very specifically the federal workforce, when we do this integration of SAM into the modernized environment. And I'm hoping to do that. There we go. On the agenda is give briefly an introduction to the integrated acquisition environment, award environment, which is where I work and kind of we're the ones who manage this process, and then go through a detail of what's actually changing with this integration for you, the federal user. And then showing through screenshots, essentially the process of what it currently looks like and what we're moving to really give you that in-depth view of what's changing and how it's going to look and feel in that future state. And then as Ken was mentioning, we are going to hopefully have time for questions and answers as they're put into that Q&A chat box up at the top. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and kick things off. Again, my name is Catherine Rollins. I am a lead project manager within the Integrated Award Environment, or IAE. We are located within the Federal Acquisition Service within GSA, so fellow Govies. And predominantly what we do is we oversee a number of systems that work towards the federal awards process. And it is the full award life cycle that we deal with. Right now, each one of the systems is kind of siloed out and a part of that process. And so what we're trying to do across the board is reduce barriers for doing business, whether you are a government person who is coming in one of those intergovernmental transactions, or if non-federal users coming in to do business, increasing transparency into federal spending, all of that beautiful reporting that we have to do, increasing accountability into the award process, reducing the reporting burden. That one's probably big for you guys who actually have to do the reporting and the data entry on all of these awards that are going on. And then definitely increasing data quality and the integrity of the data itself as we move forward. And hopefully you'll see some of that too. So as I was saying, IAE, we do manage or oversee several variety of systems across this award process. The circle over on the side, the green top part, shows the items that have already been modernized. So we've already gone through a process of retiring the legacy CFDA, which is now the assistance listings, WDOL, which is now wage determinations, FBO, which is now contract opportunities, and the FPDS reports, which is now the contract data in our data bank, all within the current beta.SAM.gov. The next item that is going to be going into that green fold is SAM, which does include the entity registrations, the exclusions, and some of the contractor reporting for SCR and bio preferred. And so that's where the next little green mark is going to cover over. And then we just become SAM. The other systems are going to be pulled in and modernized in the future. I'm not going to be covering those modernizations today. So the focus is just on that SAM and beta.SAM integration. Just some numbers for IAE and SAM.gov. We do a lot of things. We interact with a lot of people. If you're here today, it is probably because you are one of the people that is either doing research, you're one of that 68 million that's doing a search, or you're directly interacting, you're one of the registrations for IGTs or something else. So a lot of folks impacted through this transition and through this site. So where we're at with the migration, I want to kind of get into the meat of things because I know we're at 45 minutes. So where we're at with the transition very specifically of modernizing SAM.gov. Many years ago, back in 2012, there was the beginning of the eGov initiative where we did an initial integration of the legacy CCR, ORCA, and EPLS into SAM.gov. That was kind of the first phase of things. We then sort of took a step back and did this overview of the other systems that we needed to, again, migrate in as the overarching eGov initiative. And that is when beta.SAM.gov got created for those other items to be modernized. And now we're at a point that we can integrate the two to start fully realizing a single award system. So what has happened is in that beta.SAM.gov, there was a new redesign that was launched April 26th, just last month, that helped set up our current users of beta.SAM.gov and paved the road for when SAM will migrate in. The actual SAM.gov users, so if you're on current SAM.gov, the integration or the change that will start impacting you will happen on May 24th. And the big thing here is that on May 24th, it's just going to be SAM.gov. So we are dropping that beta and all of the current functionality that you currently do in beta.SAM.gov or in the current SAM.gov will all just be at SAM.gov. So the next part is going to be a combination of explanation, but also like this screen shares to kind of walk you through as the user what you see today and then what you will get to experience in the future. And so as a federal user or as any person who goes onto the current SAM.gov, this is what the homepage currently looks like. If you currently go to beta.SAM.gov, this is the public, you're not signed in view that you see. And you'll notice predominantly in the middle of this page, you can see the domains that are currently in beta.SAM.gov. So it's at contract opportunities, contract data, wage determinations, federal hierarchy, and assistance listings. These other systems that we have already migrated in and modernized. And then on May 24th, this is what both the legacy SAM folks and the beta.SAM.gov folks will see. And so as you can see, again, in that middle section, we have added in entity registrations, entity reporting, and exclusions. So for the beta.SAM.gov folks, the big change is going to be that the beta goes away. They will just be coming to SAM.gov. For the SAM.gov users, it's a little bit more because now they're sharing space with those other domains as well. For the current SAM folks, the primary items that you're used to seeing on that homepage are still on the homepage, and they're kind of highlighted here. But again, you're sharing with the current beta.SAM.gov wider award system. So up in the top header, there is that data services area that, again, you're used to on the current SAM homepage. There are also ways to get to a landing page or specific search functionality of just entity registrations, entity reporting, or exclusions data, if that's what you need to get to. There's also quick links to getting started to register your entity, renewing your entity, or checking a registration status. Again, all right from the homepage. So one of the big questions is, why are we changing? Things are going okay. Why are you making us do this? The big idea is that we are continuing to reduce the burden for our users by streamlining this online award process. So whether it is a non-federal user who is trying to manage an entity through this process, whether you are a contracting officer who is trying to put something out there as a need that the government needs to acquire, you're a contract specialist helping with those ideas as well, or you need to do research and validation across the data sets. So what awards have already been out there? What is our spending looking like? Any of those pieces of information. The idea right now is that you've got to go to all of these individual sites. By integrating the portfolio of these shared systems into a common secure business environment, it allows you as the user to have a single place to go to for that stuff, whether it is the searching or reporting of information. On the idea of how we are making this change, the number one bullet there is really true, where we're doing it by incorporating the feedback from our users. We are looking at what is the current site functionality and what is working and what is not working for the user. And then how can we start incorporating or helping the user with those things that are not working and making sure that hopefully we're keeping the things that is working for the user. To do that, we're doing things at the very beginning with focus groups, workshops, interviews, online feedback tool. We're looking at FSD tickets as they come in from the current site. We're looking at live digital analytics of how the users are using this site. And of course, getting feedback from our governance group. So it's a very deliberate path of how we're making these changes and how we're deciding and determining what we are doing as we move forward with this modernization. Another piece with this change is it is allowing us to conform with the new design to be compliant with the 21st Century Integrated Digital Experience Act and GSA's guidelines for digital presence. One of the big things that this does is the mobile compatibility across all the different sites. So again, if you come to SAM.gov for a mobile experience through a tablet or through your desktop or laptop, there is still that accessibility there. So what is changing on May 24th? And this is from the SAM.gov current users. So what's happening is that the beta.SAM.gov users will be automatically directed to SAM.gov. So there's going to be no more beta. They're going to switch over. We're going to do an automatic routing on that, as well as to any bookmarked beta.SAM.gov URLs. So especially for a contracting officer, if you have a bookmark for your acquisition, if you go to that bookmark after May 24th for a opportunity notice, for instance, it will direct you to the same notice on SAM.gov. Another item that is changing is the sign-in will be required to search public entity registrations and the disaster response registry. This is across the board. So a public user who wants to just see the public entity registrations also has to sign in. They don't need a specific role or permissions, but they do need to sign in. There's more information coming up specific to the federal user for you guys. On the homepage, we've additionally added links for entity registrations, exclusions, and entity reporting. I'm going to go into more details on these, especially the exclusions, which has a specific area to give you more information as a federal user to that domain and things that are happening there. You can also search across entity information, which is again, the entity registrations, exclusions, and the disaster response registry. And then from the entity registration, if you, as a federal user, there is management of intergovernmental transactions, IGTs, and potentially some other registrations. Those you would actually be able to manage through your workspace with a homepage and landing pages as well. So what is not changing? For the current users of beta.SAM.gov, the items that you have come to know and love around contract opportunities, wage determinations, assistance listings, federal hierarchy, and the contract data reports, all of that functionality is staying the same. So the items that you see in your workspace, the roles, everything around those items is remaining the same for May 24th. For entity registration, the actual process and requirements. So again, as a federal user, if you go in to start an IGT, you still need the specific roles. You can start it. You will still need the same information. You will still have the same requirements. That whole process stays the same for the actual registration. And so again, that the entity registration, the data entry pages, so we're actually filling in the form saying that you want to start a new registration or you're renewing a registration, those also are staying the same. There's a note on here about searching active exclusions that will remain public with no additional roles, permissions, or sign-in needed. Data that we are going to migrate over with no action needed from an entity or from a user. The registration exclusions data, we're going to migrate over. Don't need to worry about that. SAM user roles. So if you have an actual role in SAM.gov today, we are going to migrate the account / the role over to the modernized environment. All information about the service contract reporting and buyer preferred reporting, we are going to migrate that over as well. This is more of a knowledge point for should you get asked as a federal user, if you're a contracting officer and your vendors come to you with questions on extensions or awards that are coming up around the migration time period. With the implementation of the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, OMB did offer a relief for entities doing business with the government. Part of this was that they did allow us to do a 180-day extension to the SAM registrations that would be expiring between April 1st and September 30th. So what this means is that if someone did have an entity that was going to expire in a registration on April 1st, it was automatically granted an extension to September 28th. We are doing these in buckets and kind of a rolling process. So the ones that are later on are going to see them as we get closer. But it is going to, we are automatically doing that for the registrations, so they don't have to do any actions there. So for federal users, I spoke earlier about the idea that if you have a role in current SAM.gov, we are going to migrate that information for you. To be clear about what roles we mean, or what current actions there are in legacy SAM, and how those transition over to the modernized site, I wanted to go in a little bit more detail here. So If you currently in SAM have that role of an agency roles administrator, it's the same exact role May 24th when you go to SAM.gov and see the new homepage. It's the same permissions, it will be the same access. For the agency administrator entity management, same deal. On May 24th, when you come into SAM.gov, it's going to be your same login information. You will be able to go to your profile area. When you look at your roles, you will see agency administrator entity management with any of the associations there. Office registration representative, same deal. Sensitive entity management data viewer, same deal here. The next four, I'm going to go into more detail. Right now, as a federal user, authenticated, but you don't actually have a role. So when you go to SAM.gov, if you log in, but you have not been granted one of the 4 roles I just talked about, then you are an authenticated federal user without a role. For those users, on May 24th, when you come to SAM.gov, you will put in your login information. You will then be asked to complete the rest of the registration, which will include like your first name and your last name. And then it'll ask if you want a role. If all that you need access to is the non-public data, so for the entity registrations for search and view, you have entity registrations that say, yes, have me be a part of public search and view. Anyone can view those. You then have entities that have opted out of that public search. And then of course you have the other non-public ones similar to like IGTs. In order to search any of those registrations, you just need to be an authenticated federal user. You still don't need any sort of a role or extra permissions. By being a federal user, you will be able to perform those searches and get those results. If, however, you have a business need to specifically see the FOUO data on an entity registration, so this is specific to items like the TIN, which is on an entity registration, you will have to request the FOUO Entity Management Data Viewer role. So this is a change, and that's why we've highlighted this. So if all that you need access to, again, is just that non-public entity registration data, you just need to see if those registrations are active or inactive or what state they're at, that you will be able to do as a federal user. Very specifically on the registration page, if you need access to that FOUO data elements, then you need to request this FOUO Entity Management Data Viewer. And again, as a part of that registration process, you will be asked if you would like to get a role. And so you can request this directly from there. The next one on the list is Data Extracts User. This used to be the role that people would request for specific access to the data extracts kind of a system connection, essentially. In the modernized SAM, you will actually have to get a system account. For federal users, you will need a role from your agency administrator in order to start this process. The last line on here is about the agency hierarchy maintainer. This is not transitioning to the modernized SAM. The agency hierarchy, similar to now in current SAM, the pull comes from, it originates with beta.SAM. And so in the future modernized state, the federal hierarchy will manage these items. So it's not a separate role under the agency hierarchy maintainer area. It is the federal hierarchy administrator maintains your hierarchy information. So to go through each one of these, and again, most of these, I'm going to go kind of quickly through the first groupings because these are not changing from the current SAM. So the agency role is administrator. This is an administrator who assigns and manages federal roles within the entity management and exclusions domains. But you don't have any rights to actually edit these records. The agency administrator for entity management. This person can manage the roles and the users within entity registration domain, as well as actually has the ability to edit entity registrations as well. So again, for the federal side, this is going to be the IGTs. An office registration representative, that same idea of creating and editing like an IGT. However, they don't have any ability to manage users. So that's just someone who has that administrator piece to the role. We talked about the idea of the FOUO entity management data viewer, which is new. And that is the idea that they can see all of those things that kind of the regular federal user can. So view active and inactive registrations, view registrations that have opted out of public search, view registrations that are like IGTs or other ones that are not public, view and download the full SCR and bio-preferred reports and see individual reports from any entity. All of those top 4 bullets you have access to as a federal user. That last bullet is the one that you have to have this FOUO entity management data viewer for. And that's for viewing the FOUO data elements on the registration page. The sensitive entity management data viewer works as it does today. It's to do all of those bullet points from the FOUO. Additionally, though, you can also get access then to the banking and other sensitive data, again, directly on the entity registration page. So kind of saying it again, just to make sure, but if you're a federal user with no role in SAM today, you're still going to be able to see those non-public entities and IGTs through search. If you specifically need to see that FOU information or like the TIN, then you have to request a role. For right now, the TIN will be accessible through FOUO or through the sensitive viewer. There will be a change later on around this, but for integration, for May 24th, the FOUO or the sensitive role will be able to see the TIN information.
Hey, Kat, this is Ken. I'm just going to jump in kind of at the halfway point here. We've had a lot of people join. So I just want to remind everybody again, there's 2 chat logs. One is a Q&A chat log. I understand that some people are saying that they can't access the Q&A chat log. It may be an individual setting on your computer. It seems to be working for many people. Also, the audio is working for most people, and most people are able to see the slides themselves. So we're sorry if there is some issue that is preventing you from being able to hear, see, or enter questions. But again, we will absolutely make this recording and the deck itself available in just a couple of days on Interact. And if you can, please enter any questions that you have in the Q&A chat log. If you're not able to access that chat log, we will try to go through the regular chat log and get to your question. But if you're able to access the Q&A chat log, please use that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ken. Thank you for the reminders. So after all of that fun of here's all these beautiful roles, the question comes up, how do I get one of these things? So there's multiple places where you can trigger or you can start that request role process. Once you start that process, you will be asked to fill in some information such as your supervisor information, the specific organization, what role you need, and then the domain for that role. One of the places, or kind of the primary place that you're probably going to see this, is on your workspace. So your workspace is your personalized space that gives you your access You'll see in the center section here, it says workspace, and then there's a place for collective bargaining agreements, user directory, and federal hierarchy. This is by default what every federal user sees. If they have a role to contract opportunities, for instance, there would be an additional widget that would also say contract opportunities with access to data entry for notices. If they had a role within the assistance listings, again, they would see an additional widget that would show their stuff and a way for them to access and do data entry for the assistance listings domain. But in this workspace, for every user, down at the bottom on the right-hand side, it says add a new role. And from there, you will be able to directly select a role of which you might need. As you can see in kind of the pullout here, it says entity registration, and then there's that sensitive entity management data viewer, and then FOUO entity management data viewer. You'll notice there is also a domain called contracts, that is contracting officer and contract specialist. There's also assistance with assistance user. If you need access to the FOUO data on an entity registration page, you need to be selecting the FOUO entity management data viewer role here. If you select contracting officer, you're actually asking for edit rights or to be a contracting officer of those pre-award contract opportunity notices. Okay, so this goes back to the idea of SAM.gov now covers the functionality of all of those prior systems. So contracts, that would be the old FBO and being a contracting officer in FBO or a contract specialist in FBO. The assistance one with the assistance user, that's like being a assistance person in CFDA. Okay. So just to make sure that you're requesting from the right space and the right role. If you are a contracting officer and you are posting notices and contract opportunities, and as a contracting officer doing award information, you need access to the FOUO entity data fields. You can request both, and you would need to request both in order to do both actions. So you'd be selecting contracting officer and the FOUO entity management data viewer. Other places to request roles is within your profile and then my roles page. There's a cool little spot there where you can see all of your roles. So after May 24th, if you want to check what has transitioned or migrated over, you can do that from this page. If you do see anything missing, or again, you need to do that extra request, you can simply select the request role button and you do get that data entry form. For administrators, so changing this a little bit. So as an administrator, you have what is now called, instead of the My SAM page, you now have a user directory that you will see on your workspace. And that's what that pull out down at the bottom here is, the user directory. From there, you can go in and see the other federal users that are tied to your department, very specifically. If you are just a federal user, you again can see the other users, but you just see their name and where they sit and their email. You can't actually see their roles or permissions or any additional details. If you are an administrator though, then you additionally get, as shown here in the red box, an actions button where then you can also select to view that person's access and to assign roles. And again, if you select to assign a role, it'll bring up a similar looking item where you put in the person's email address and then the role, the domain, and the other information needed in order to assign that role to the user. As an administrator or as a federal user, if you've requested a role and you're trying to figure out what state that request is in, from the workspace page, you can go to pending requests, and that opens up your request feeds. Or from the header bar, once you're logged in, there's also a place to see requests. Both of those will take you to the same request feeds page. As an administrator, you will see all requests that are pending or that are open for you, that you have some sort of management or insight into. If you are a requester, so you're a federal user who is asking for a role, this is where you would be able to see the status of where that is. So it could be in a pending state, approved, it could have gotten rejected. It will all show up here. Your SAM workspace today looks like this. And I've kind of pinpointed a couple things here, but overarching, this is what your SAM workspace will look like after May 24th. From here, as a federal user, the primary items that I'm going to focus on up at the top, if you are one of those exclusions administrators or you manage exclusions for your agency, you would see this widget with that role. From here, you can directly start adding a new exclusion. You can review the current agency exclusions, or you can just get to that further tier 2 workspace. Also down at the bottom, I was mentioning the idea that user directory, where if you are just a federal user, you can go to the user directory to see across your department. If you are specifically an administrator, the user directory is going to be your primary place to assign roles and manage users to figure out what roles they have or if someone needs something new. The federal hierarchy, this widget is for specifically looking within your department at the information for your federal hierarchy. On the right-hand side, these are the same for any federal user. So again, that pending requests idea, this is for requests that you have given, or if you're an administrator, requests that might be pending your action. And then notifications are system notifications, and everyone will see those. This is showing what a tier 2 page would show. So this is showing entity reporting. I could also sub this out to show exclusions. What would happen in that exclusions page if you selected on any of the exclusions or on the title exclusions, it would take you to what's called a tier 2 page. The tier 2 page is the details of that domain. So this will show the things that you control or that you manage. So again, you have to have a role and permissions for the exclusions domain, and then you would be able to see these transactions. And it's going to be things that are active, that are inactive, the things that might be in process for your agency because of your role. For those who manage IGTs, if you do have the correct role and permission, you would see that entity management widget. Similarly, there is a tier 2 page that you would see for managing those registrations. As a note for the contracting officers out there, hopefully you guys already know this, but the SAM UEI is going to show along with the DUNS number starting May 24th. So throughout SAM.gov, we will be showing both pieces of information. The DUNS remains the authoritative ID until April 2022. So for right now, we are just showing the DUNS, letting folks get used to it. It's part of our exports, everything else, but the DUNS remains authoritative. This is an example of the workspace specifically for the entities, where again, over on the right-hand side, what it's trying to show is the status, and then sort of where things are in that process, the expiration date, if there's a physical address update. We're just trying to clean things up and make it a little bit more user-friendly for folks managing entity registrations. So the entity record view today looks like this. May 24th, it is going to look like this. Again, we've cleaned things up. On the right-hand side, there's a quick way to go between the different tabs. And then we've tried to eliminate white space and just kind of clean up the focal point here, doing some other tags with like the expiration date and the registration status to just draw attention to those and make those very clear as to what state things are in. The SAM.gov search today is at the bottom of the homepage. You can select that search records. On May 24th, from the homepage, you can go to that entity registrations or the exclusions landing page. Those very specifically will only search within those domains then. If you do want to search across all of the entity information, so including entity registrations and exclusions data together, you'll want to use the bar down below. You would simply select entity information and then put in a keyword, DUNS number, cage code, any of those items, and then select to search. This is a preview of what the landing pages look like. As I was saying earlier, there's one entity reporting, entity registrations. You'll notice on the exclusions one, there is actually a box for federal users that very specifically has a exclusions federal home and a go-to workspace. This is to help if you manage exclusions as a federal official. You can go to that exclusions federal homepage that has additional help topics specific to roles, to access, any of those other points directly for you. And then the go-to workspace is just a real quick, if you're already signed in, it'll just take you to your workspace. If you're not signed in, it will ask you to sign in, and then it'll take you over there. From any one of these landing pages, you do have a search. This quick search, again, is just for that domain. So if you put a cage code or a DUNS number in here, for instance, or a red entity name into this search field and then selected to search, you are only searching entity registrations. So this would not pull back exclusions from this search. On the right-hand side, again, those are those quick links similar to the homepage of getting started, renewing an entity, and checking the registration status. Each one of the landing pages, and this one's on the exclusions, you do have that advanced search, which takes you to additional filters. And then the bottom portion of the page across the board is going to be help specific to that domain. So in this case, it starts off with getting started with searching exclusions, using some of the advanced search items. It'll talk about very specific filters that you can use. And then further down for exclusions, it talks about resources, downloading the data files, connecting to data services, and help. If you go to that federal home one, it would additionally have items around roles, role management, the workspace, and data entry for exclusions. So each one of these is tailored to the users that are looking at it. As we mentioned before, starting on May 24th, sign-in will be required to look at entity registration data. You don't have to have a specific role or permission. So again, coming in, if you were authenticated as a federal user, you will be, and you sign in, of course, and it recognizes you as a federal user, you will be able to see the public entity registrations, the non-public entity registrations, IGTs, all of those things right here through the search. If you're not signed in, though, it will tell you whether you're federal or not. It will prompt you that you need to sign in. This is an example of search results from the modernized environment. This is from a logged in user. Starting at the top, you'll see there are the search results. You can do a quick save search from here that will keep your filters. And you can name it then or change it. If you're already on a save search, you can also copy it or additionally add things. The actions, that's going to be if you want to download your search results into a different format. Coming down the left-hand side of the page, these are where the filters are. There was a lot of user feedback from prior implementations looking at SAM.gov current, as well as the beta.SAM. And so we've made improvements on both of those. The filters all show up, A. On top of that, they do expand out in order to put in additional information. I do want to note, if you're using the keyword search, that adding additional keywords will continue to expand your results. So if you put in company, it might have had 15 results. By doing company and US, it will increase it to 23. So it'll keep expanding the numbers. It looks for all of those things, not exclusive. So continuing down, these are normal filters that you see on current SAM. They are available here. You'll just have to expand them and add whatever details you would like to. The search is interactive. So as soon as you make a change, the results will change directly based upon that. And then you don't have to come back out in order to change the search. You can just do it right there on the page. And then you do have the sort by. There's a variety of options there as well. So again, the idea of the keywords and filters are the same as in SAM.gov, but in a compact, user-friendly way. This is a page getting started with registrations, less for you as the federal user. But again, if you have someone who is coming to you saying, hey, I want to bid on this thing, I need help with this. This is the page that we direct folks to for if they are starting or trying to figure out that registration process. This is a landing page that goes through step by step what they need to do, what documents they may need, any other information, and estimates on how long each stage may take. So this is a good resource to direct folks to. Once you're actually on the data entry, so as a registering entity, changing an entity for the exclusions data entry folks, the actual pages aren't changing, the middle part of the information. Those are staying the same. What is going to change is the header and the footer. So you'll see here, it's a slightly different view up top to look like the rest of SAM.gov starting May 24th. Because that middle part is staying the same, there are additional aspects that are staying the same. So just like today in SAM, if you're in the middle of data entry, you need to actually select that next or previous in order to save the data. If you're midway through an action and then click out of the page, go to search or anything else, it will give you this prompt that it's not saving the data. So that's holding true for the entity and exclusions data entry stuff. This is again showing the idea of needing to be logged in for certain activities. So checking the entity registration status. You do need to be signed in. As a federal user, you will be able to see across the entities here. For non-federal users, they will only be able to see their own registration status. So for a non-federal user, they'd have to have a role to that entity in order to see where it is in the process. A quick note for our SAM extract or SOAP service users, we are changing this process around. So if you're a system or a user that currently connects to SAM.gov through the system extracts or SOAP services, need you to immediately after this, go to open.gsa.gov, start looking at the access documentation and reach out to new SAM testing at gsa.gov to start testing. Because we are moving all of those things over to REST APIs and the SFTP is going away. So we need to get you moved over ASAP. For system accounts, and this is part of what we'll walk through once you start that alpha process, you will need a role as a federal user, but there is a process in place within the system to request a system account to get you that access and permissions and that higher load use. So if you're a system that's intent on regularly pulling large amounts of data, you're going to want to make sure you have this system account set up. Briefly, I'm going to touch on again the UEI SAM. So the DUNS will remain official until April 2022. Starting with the May transition, we are going to be showing the SAM UEI throughout SAM.gov, as well as the DUNS. April 2022 is when the SAM UEI will become official. But until then, it's just kind of extra data for people transitioning over to it until that time frame. So the DUNS is going to remain the official UEI until April 2022. So folks registering, tracking, all of that sort of stuff, DUNS is the official UEI for all of those purposes, making awards and that until April 2022. Just want to make sure we have that part. Towards the end, there's just a couple items about help that I want to mention, and then we can turn things over to the Q&A. One thing here is that we are integrating more with FSD. Currently, many of our sites have their own learning centers, their own help pages, everything else. We are starting the integration with FSD, so there is one place for a user to get help. Whether you're a federal, whether you're a system, whatever your needs are, there's one place that you can look for and get that help that you need, hopefully quicker and in a better way. So from the site directly, you can select help, and then all of these knowledge bases, the create incident live chat, we are going to have that on the SAM.gov site. All of those take you over to FSD though. It's not a separate help desk or anything else. It's all with FSD. From FSD directly, you can just go into the knowledge base. And again, it's going to be the same things that you would get if you went from SAM.gov into any of those FAQs. It's all interconnected. The last piece here is about the feedback tool. The way that we make improvements, the way that we know about improvements, one of the primary ways that we hear from you guys, the users, is through the feedback tool. We are putting this in the footer now, and so it will be across every single page. The use of this is for what is working for you on the site or ideas for improvements. If you're actually having a technical issue, like you can't, complete an exclusion, something's going wrong, you're getting errors, you need to go to the Federal Service Desk. Again, this is for enhancements or extra ideas or anything else. We do love hearing from you guys on this. And like I said earlier, we do look at the feedback that we get and make improvements to the site based specifically on the feedback that we get. So with that, I'm going to leave this up here. I do want to make two extra notes. If you have folks, again, the audience here was for federal users. If you have folks who want to know a little bit more from the non-federal perspective or the full, change around, again, non-federal side of the house, we did a 2-hour presentation last week to include a demonstration of a live demo of the new site. That is on the Interact site, so you're welcome to view it there. Also, if you have folks that are very interested or need help with the contract opportunity search with the redesign, we do also have from late April, there's again a demo that was done on that topic specifically. And again, that's on interact.gsa.gov as well. Ken, I think I'm turning things back over to you for a moment.
All right, great. Thanks, Kat. So, we're aware of all the conversations going on in the chat log. Please understand that we have received hundreds of questions in the last 50 minutes. We are going to spend some time now. I think we'll all be able to hang on for a few extra minutes, and we will try to answer some of the questions that we've received. We've already answered some in writing, but obviously we have not been able to get to every single question during this program. Again, you can reach us at the email address that's on your screen right now. Please follow us on Interact, and we will also post a written version of the question and answers on Interact. You're obviously going to have to give us a couple of days here. We have a lot of questions coming in. So with that, let's just jump into a few of the top ones, and we'll try to answer as many as we can here in the next couple of minutes. My other colleagues have been monitoring. Salome or Nancy, do you have some top questions that we could start with?
Oh, yes, we do. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Okay, great, thanks. So Kat, one pain point that we are seeing a lot of uncertainty around is related to the official use only data. So we've got a few, I think, that could be addressed by another kind of a step through. But so some of the questions involve, what role do you need to see the TIN? Is official use only needed to see reps and certs? What about banking data, business size? Can you kind of go over that part again, please?
Yeah, so if you are a federal user currently in SAM.gov with no role, on May 24th, you will go to SAM.gov, you will select sign in, you will put in your same information that you are currently putting into SAM.gov, and then you'll be taken to a complete your registration page. It'll have a couple additional notes, just checking your department, your name, all of that. The next screen that you will see will be asking if you want a role. As a federal user with no role and no extra permissions needed, you will be able to see the public data. So any entity registration and all of the public details for that entity registration. Additionally, again, as a federal user, no role, no special permissions needed, you will be able to see the non-public registrations through search, such as IGTs or those entities that have selected to not be a part of the public search. The reports piece of things, again, as a current SAM.gov user, you will be able to see those items as tied to the entity, and the I won't say exports, but the reps and certs information, again, as a federal user, no additional roles or permissions, you will also be able to see the reps and certs information. If you additionally, so you get all of that just by being a federal user. If you additionally need to see FOUO data elements on the registration page, right now the TIN is still considered FOUO. If you need access to that, there's a business need for it, then when you get to that role request page, you will want to select FOUO Entity Management Data Viewer. And that will route your request to an administrator and everything else. If you need access to the TIN and all of that other information, and additionally, you need information to banking data, so you're more on the financial side of things. If you need that as well, then what you need to select in that role request is the sensitive Entity Management Data Viewer. That holds true, like that's the same as current SAM. To see that financial information, you have to be a sensitive viewer. So that is holding true. That role will migrate over, that sensitive viewer, that we are migrating. But to do the FOUO, which includes that TIN, you will need to request that role. If for some reason you go through the registration process, that page comes up to request a role and you skip it, it's okay. When you get to your workspace, you can go to your profile and then that My Roles page and look to see what migrated. Because again, you might have thought that you had a role, you might have thought that you have sensitive access and maybe you don't. You can verify that when you get to that page. At that point in time, if you've determined, nope, I do need FOUO or I need sensitive, you can simply go to that request role right on that page and request the right access that you need.
So Kat, this is Nancy. Just to be clear, if I already have a sensitive role, that will migrate over. I don't need to do anything. And that includes access to what we're calling FOIA information as well, right? So I see everything then, essentially.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So the new role is strictly for someone who needs to see TIN or other FOIA information.
Yeah.
Okay, then we have, so there are questions related to who actually approves the requests for the FUO Entity Management Data Viewer and Sensitive Entity Management Data Viewer.
So the request will automatically be routed to an administrator within your department. It will go to the agency and roles administrator, I think is the generic one. It will go to that person and the entity management administrator. I might be messing up that role name, but the roles administrator and the administrator who manages users and can edit registrations, both of those administrators, anyone with either one of those roles, will be able to help out these users. Those administrators are at different levels. So I believe like some of those administrators could be at a office level, for instance. When you submit your request, part of it will be organization. If you put it at the office level, it will go to that direct administrator, but any of the higher levels will also see it. So like your department administrator will also be able to see that request come through as a pending request needing action. So, but the agency roles administrator and the entity management administrator, both of those will have rights and controls and permissions to approve the FOUO and the sensitive data viewer roles.
And just to be clear, nobody can actually request those roles until May 24th, right?
Correct. Right now, you cannot go into beta.SAM.gov and see any of the data that I just talked about, and you cannot go in there and request any of the roles. And if you try to go to profiles, you will not see any of those roles. Starting Friday, May 21st, we will be doing the user and role migration. And so starting May 24th is when you can actually go in and again, check your profile and the My Roles page to see what transferred.
And we do have a couple of questions not FUO related. Do entities need to request a SAM UEI?
No, so, well, when they, so it is going to be automatically done, essentially. That's part of our transition point. Right now with the DUNS, you have to separately go and request it. What will happen is through the registration process, the entity will be given that UEI SAM. It is not an additional step. It is just part of the registration.
Okay, and let's see. The email address associated with my SAM.gov account today is different from the one associated with beta.SAM.gov. What do I need to do?
You're going to have some hard choices. Now, so I can't give a blanket answer to this, unfortunately. It really depends on what roles you have. If you are a, agency entity administrator, for instance, and you are the only one for your agency, then you're going to want to look at what you have associated to your beta.SAM account. Again, the roles are managed by the agencies and by the departments. So if you only have saved searches, for instance, on beta.SAM, that might be the easier thing to transition over, just recreate those on the SAM account, essentially, that has roles. If you have roles on both, then again, it might start becoming a question of, which role is easier to transition or to get on the other account, essentially. We are not doing, there's no way for us to do a validation that, the different email addresses is the same person. So we can't do that migration for you. But again, depending on the roles, depending on the access, it's kind of you choose which one you want to stick with. And then it's just moving the other stuff over to that other account.
Okay, thank you. And do we have time for one more?
Yeah, as long as we're good, yeah, we still have many people on the line, so.
So I see someone posted a question, and I'm going to read it out to you, Kat. I need to search on an entity or a person associated with that entity to ensure that there are no active exclusions. What role do I need, and where do I search for that information, given that I have the entity name or DUNS?
So you will want to be, I'm going to make one little assumption on here that you are trying to make an award, and that is why you are checking it. So for that process, you will need to go up and sign in with your federal account information. From there, I would recommend on the home page going to that main search bar, selecting entity information, and then putting that piece of it, the DUNS, especially it could be the POC. You may need to run several queries, just the different elements, but you will want to make sure that you are logged in as a federal user, and that way you will get the public registrations and the non-public registrations. And you will get the active and inactive exclusions. You'll be able to see all of the things that you would need to with that federal view in order to make award decisions.
Okay. And you did mention active and inactive entities. The searches will bring back both of those, correct?
Yeah, for the registrations, yeah, if you're a federal user, yes, you see both. As a non-federal user, you will get active and inactive, but only the public entities and the ones that have selected to show up in the public search. So.
Okay, Nancy, I believe I got all the core ones. Did I miss anything?
No, no, you're good.
All right, then we'll turn it back over to Kat and or Ken.
I will say, I know we have started putting a bunch of information out through Interact on the things that are changing, the things that are saying the same. We are going through all of our, like I was talking about with that FSD repository, we are going through all of the current SAM knowledge articles, as well as creating a lot of new knowledge articles to help users with the transition, and then especially after the transition, just making sure that they understand where they're supposed to be going, what is visible, where things are at, all of those things. There's some quick start guides, everything else as well that we started handing out to folks. So we're trying to beef up all of that help, essentially, because we know this is a change, and lots of questions come out from change, and trying to help folks with it.
Kat, we do have one participant who was kind of trying to interact, trying to get a question answered. And I don't know if we already answered this. I kind of was juggling back and forth. So if we already answered it, the question is, which role is required to view the TIN numbers? Do you need a sensitive or an FOUO?
So for May 24th, you can view the TIN with an FOUO or sensitive.
Okay. So either or. Excellent. Okay, well then with that said, we're about 10 minutes past our planned time. I want to thank everybody for joining today. Please, again, a lot of this information is available on Interact. Please follow us there. You get lots of answers to lots of your questions. And in a few days, we'll take as many of your questions as we were able to capture. We will try to answer them in writing, and we will post them there. So in the meantime, thank you for joining today's webinar. We hope that you got some useful information out of it. And we look forward to the transition on May 24th. So thanks everybody for participating, and have a great afternoon.